I'm not very good at telling stories.
You're doing good. You're doing good. The stories are great. That's what I'm looking for, some more stories. So tell me about the trip down. How did you get down to Kentucky?
Well, the first time I remember going down there, we were in a Model T Ford, and it took us 24 hours to get down there. And that's before they built any expressways, and there's no bridges that go across the Ohio River, so you used to have to take a ferry boat across. But we drive so many hours, and then my dad would get tired, and we'd pull over to the side of the road, and my mother would get the sandwiches out and milk or whatever we had. We couldn't afford pop. And we'd have lunch, and then we'd all go to sleep, and then we'd wake up, and I wake up to the sound of the motor going again, and I knew we were on our way. I remember one time we were going down there, we went past the car on the side of the road, it was burning up. Nobody around. My mother was scared to death because she thought it was going to explode, which it possibly could have as we went around it. My dad waited a while, nothing showed up, so he just went on by it. Then we got to the Ohio River. The Maud didn't want to get on the ferry boat because she's afraid to ride on a ferry boat, so my dad finally convinced her that it was okay to go across on the ferry boat, so drove the old Essex onto the ferry boat and went across. Now we went to stay with my Uncle Claude and my Aunt Loney and their boys. They had about 8 or 9 kids. And my best memory of that is getting up early in the morning and when they went out to do their work in the fields, they'd have a big, huge breakfast. Like a banquet, like BJ's or one of those places. They'd have it all laid out about 6 o'clock in the morning, and that was their breakfast. But they got out into the fields maybe around 4 o'clock, and they'd come in and have their big breakfast, and that would be their big meal of the day. And I remember they raised tobacco, and I remember helping cultivate tobacco with a mule, and they let me take it and go down the row with it, but I immediately started chopping up tobacco plants, so they took it away from me. But that's the way they did things in those days. And I remember the homemade buttermilk. My grandmother had a churn, old-fashioned churn. She'd get up early in the morning and churn that butter and make buttermilk and make milk. That was my mother's mother. That was a different place. My Uncle Claude and Aunt Loney lived out in country, and my grandmother, she lived in town. She lived in a little town called Philpott. She had a little house and a little farm there. And I remember going to church there. There's a church there called St. James, and every morning we'd go there, and I'm going to tell you a little story that you might not appreciate, but all the women that were nursing babies be sitting in the front row. When the baby got hungry, they'd go, whip it out, and nobody thought anything of it. Nobody even looked, just went on normal. So things have changed a lot, haven't they, since that time. But that's...
Did you look?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I was only about maybe 4 or 5 years old. The first time I remember going down there, I was about 4 or 5 years old. Yeah, I probably looked. Yeah. Yeah. Now you mention it, I did look. But
Tell me about your ancestors, starting with your parents and then their names and whatever you remember, and then their parents as far back as you can go.
Well, I'll start with my father. His father's name was Mark Hartley, and he was married to Cordelia Arnold. And then my grandfather, my great-grandfather was John Addy Hartley, and he was married to a woman by the name of Mary Hardesty. And John Addy Hartley was a Baptist minister. And when he married my great-grandmother, Mary Hardesty, she made him promise he'd raise all the kids Catholic. This is a true story. So they raised all the kids Catholic, and that's how we became Catholic. Otherwise, we would have been Southern Baptist. So then, when he died, he was buried in the Baptist cemetery, and she's buried in the Catholic cemetery. And I know you saw a picture of her. Remember I sent you that picture? He's got a big long beard like this here, and she looked like she'd been working in the fields. That's John Addy Hartley and Mary Hardesty. That's as far back as I got on that side of the family. And Cordelia Arnold, that ancestor goes back to Benedict Arnold. So I don't know, I can't trace it back to Benedict Arnold, but I know if you go into the ancestry, a lot of the kids are named Benedict back in those days. Then on my mother's side, she was, my grandmother was named Sophie Bowles, B-O-W-L-D-S, and she was married to a man by name of, his His name was Mattingly. I didn't know his first name. His name was Mattingly. And she had one son by the name of Claude, who would be my Uncle Claude. Then he died, and she married my grandfather, Martin Payne. He was a little short guy. My grandma told me, a little short, red-headed guy. And then he died, and then she stayed single after that. But then going back further, Sophie Bowles, her mother was Victoria Hagen, and Victoria Hagen is ancestor of Thomas Hagen, Thomas the immigrant. That goes back into Ireland in 1647, I think it is. Goes back that far. So that's my mother's side and my father's side. My grandfather, Mark Hartley, I can only remember seeing him one time. He was a great big guy. He was 6'5", weighed 350 pounds. Big, huge guy. And I remember he had a little pet squirrel. And he showed me this little pet squirrel. And he also, he made some homebrew beer. He let me take a little taste of his homebrew beer. That's the only remembrance of my grandfather, Mark Hartley. But now I'm thinking about it, history has a way of repeating itself, doesn't it? You had a little pet squirrel when you were a little boy. So that's pretty much on that side of the family. And most of my relatives are in the South. The only relative... What happened? Did it stop?
Furnace came back on.